Hello everyone, and welcome to my watercolor sketching tour of Tuscany. So today we're going to paint this gorgeous Tuscan farm. I love this picture. I took this in a place called the Val di Chiana, which is the valley under the town of Cortona. And Cortona is famous because it was in the movie Under the Tuscan Sun. So it's a very beloved Italian city, and the valley below is just beautiful. So this is a typical Tuscan farmhouse. It's kind of tall and boxy and has a couple of extra things coming out of the roof, like a little extra rooftop and a million antennas, and it's rustic and beautiful. So we're going to include that. And if you look at the photo, there's another villa further back, and you can see a beautiful road or driveway leading up to it. The rows of Tuscan pine trees and Tuscan cypress, or Italian cypress, excuse me. And in the foreground, there's a lot of just wild stuff. There's some vegetables that looks to me like artichokes, some really beautiful purple flowers, olive trees, a couple of barrels, and some wooden things. I don't know what they are. But when I look at a photo like this, I think of opportunities for shapes and color and edges and fun. So we have to have fun in sketching. The barrel, for instance, is a sphere, and the pieces of wood are nice. They're just not, it's nice to have some cubes in there. And then there's all the wild stuff in the foreground, which just shows the rustic charm. To me, it adds to the rustic charm of this painting. So anyway, let's get started. I'm going to use my 0.45 micron pen to do this drawing. And I'm going to start with the house. And I want to talk to you today about a type of drawing called the dot line method. And so here's how that goes. You put a dot down. This dot right here represents the tip of the roof where it sticks out the furthest from the viewer. And instead of drawing a line up for the roof, you draw another dot where you think that will end. And instead of drawing the line, you draw two dots, and you connect the two dots with your eyes, and you decide, is it the right angle? And so perhaps you need to move the dot down a little bit. It's easier to move a dot than it is to move a line. And so it's just a fun technique. This is sketching, and I keep repeating that, it's not a real serious type of art form, but it's supposed to be fun and scratchy and sketchy. But it is good to learn things like that for drawing architecture. It just makes it easier for you. So here's the other side of the roof. And I move that dot, and it sort of makes it a triangle. My pen's running out of ink. I think I need to get a new pen. Just a minute. I'm back now with a good pen. I needed a fresh one. It's a good thing I don't buy these in singles, and I buy them in packs of 3. Okay, so here's the first triangle for the roof. Now the side of the house does not start at the tip of the roof. You have to come in a little bit and make a straight line. And if you're worried about lines and angles, remember that this should always be parallel with the side of your page. So that's an easy one to figure out. And here's the other vertical. Now there's a tree that passes in front of the roof here, but for now we're just going to put the roof in. And this other little roof on top we'll put up here. And don't worry about, also if your lines aren't perfectly straight, it's okay to have them kind of swing out a little bit at the ends. I don't want to turn this Roman or Tuscan villa into a Japanese house where they really swing out, but it's nice to give it a little swing sometimes and not have it be too rigid looking. Okay, so I'll put in a couple of windows. Now, I can usually sketch windows in where the top of the window follows the roof line. And the The bottom of the windows do the same. You can shade these in if you want. Later I'm going to paint them green because in my memory of Tuscany there were a lot of green shutters on these houses. And the doors at the bottom were rounded. I'm going to square this one and make this one round. So there's our house, and I'm going to put a window up here and one over here. So I'm also going to put some detail with my pen to give some texture to the roof for all these roof tiles. And I'm going to darken this where there's a seam between the two sections of the roof. Like that. There. So in front of the house, there's an olive tree, 2 olive trees. So I'm going to make their trunks a bit curved and draw their branches kind of as I see them. And just a big shape for the leafy parts of the trees. Now moving over to the left, I just love these purple flowers. They're really beautiful, they're luminous, but it's kind of a small clump. So for my painting, I want to make them bigger. So I look at this and I think, wow, I wish there were a lot more purple flowers. Well, I can paint it that way. So I'm going to kind of go over here to the left. I'm going to put those purple flowers in. And I'm just doing some dark scribbles for the dark green part that's under the blossoms. And I want to give this a lot of room, so I'm just drawing a big shape, not perfectly rounded on top, but a big shape where I can put these flowers. I'm going to build that in. So this is the kind of left third. The house occupies the right third. And there's a tree, looks like another olive tree to the left, on the left side. I'm going to put that in. So when you're looking at something like this, where you have a very busy foreground, and you realize it's too much to put in, and there's a lot of messy stuff there, but you like the charm of it, so you want to get in as much as you can, but you don't want to overdo it. You want to have a beautiful sketch. Just pick out the things you like and move them around. So there's our second olive tree. Now behind the flowers there's a very dark bush, and I want to put that in also. Excuse me, and I'm making some dark shading marks with my pen to indicate to myself, so I don't forget when I'm painting, that I want to put that dark bush there. And what that does, it's one of the things that really makes the purple flowers look beautiful, because they're framed by that dark, shadowy bush. And to the right of the purple flowers and down towards the bottom of the photo, there's another plant that has sort of long stems with little leaves off of them. And there's so many varieties of green in this farmscape. There's bluish greens, like the artichoke plants, and there's yellowish greens in the grass, and these are bluish green, so that's very pretty, so I want to include those. And then over to the right here, I'm going to pop that barrel in somewhere. There are 2 barrels, but I'm going to just put one of them in, and so I think that would look nice right here. So I'm going to just draw a nice oval for the top of it, like that, little mark to indicate the inside of the rim. And then next to that is this nice square, this wooden square, which we don't know what it is, but it doesn't matter. We don't have to have everything explained to us. But we're going to take this as an opportunity to include a square and a cylinder in our watercolor landscape sketch. So there's also some other wood that's stacked up that is kind of cool. So I'm going to put that in here. So there we go. And along the side of the villa, there's a lot of dirt, looks like. And it's sort of brownish colored. So there's our foreground sketch and our house. And now I want to teach you about how to deal with this background. So we'll start with the mountain range and the clouds. So the mountain range in the photo it meets the roof about here. I'm going to move that up just slightly. And I'm just going to make a nice long continuous line with some mountain peaks and so on. And there aren't too many clouds in the sky, but they're enough. And I want to have some clouds in my painting, so I'm just going to put some clouds with my pen. One thing you want to make sure you do when you draw clouds is connect some of them. Don't end up with a whole bunch of clouds that are separate from each other. You want to connect the clouds, and you want to make sure that they're not all the same size. And you want to also make sure that you have a few that are overlapping. So there's our clouds and mountain. Now under the mountain is another ridge, which has a nice line like this. And you want to make sure that that meets the roof above that point. So you don't want the point to connect to this line. You want to make sure that they don't meet. So you want to purposefully, even if they do in a photo, or if you're on location, you want to make sure that you change that, because that will make the painting better. I'll explain why it would be confusing if somebody sees the roof and then that line becomes the mountain and the house is in the foreground and the mountain is in the background. So it would be visually confusing, and it would take away from the depth, the look of depth in your painting. So the clouds and the mountain are the background. The house and the trees and the flowers are the foreground. And then the middle ground is all this farmland in between. So we have like a couple of inches here to define lots of acres of land. So I'm going to teach you how to do that now. So we'll start with the little villa right here. And we'll just draw a very simple roof. Like that. And a couple of lines to indicate windows. And behind the villa are some tall Italian cypress trees. And that's perfect because those are nice and dark, and so the villa is light and the trees frame it. And so that's very pretty. And there's some other Italian cypress trees off to the right, so we'll draw those. And there's that pretty road I mentioned, so we're going to draw that road in. Like that. And to the right of the road are some rows of, it looks like an orchard and some crops and things. So we're going to draw a series of lines like this to show those crops, and we'll put in a few orchard trees, just simple circles. And then in front of the house here, there's another bunch of, looks like probably more fruit trees or something, so I'm just making some nice scribblies. And over to the left, there's some more trees. And so now we've got another field here in front of the house. And so since these lines are horizontal, we'll make this field have somewhat vertical lines like that. And so we're going to create this look of a patchwork farm. And to do that, you want to make sure that each one of your fields is divided by trees or a road or something like that, and that you consciously make the rows of trees or vines or whatever the crop is in different directions. Okay, so now behind the house is another field. So we'll do that one. So we'll have those going in different directions also. And then we'll put in a couple of those nice tall Italian cypress. Make sure when you draw your cypress that you don't make them all the same height. Tuscany is known for its manicured gardens, but it's also known for its rustic gardens. It's like, I guess it's like a combination of rustic and formal, which is really beautiful. Okay, there's a few more Italian cypress back here. So over here, there's another row of trees, and we definitely want to include these, and they'll be nice and big because they have sunlit tops and shadowy sides. And so that's going to be really pretty to include in our painting. And behind them are even more trees, which all look dark. The other nice thing about this row of Italian cypress is they're casting shadows. So we're going to draw those in. And since the shadows are going across the field in a horizontal way, we're going to make sure that this field has lines that are perpendicular and kind of swing around like this. And there's a row of trees and things in here. And there is our drawing. I think I'll just make a couple more marks here. And I'll make some vertical lines to show just some line work within the shape where the purple flowers are going to go. And you're probably wondering about light and shadow and where all those shadows are going to go, but we'll paint those in, and I'll teach you how to do that. I'm going to give a little shading back here. For that final ridge. Okay, I'm going to take a picture and so you can see the drawing, and then we'll start painting. So I'm going to start with my number 8 brush, and I thought it would be fun to start right away with what I'm so excited about, which are these purple flowers. I'm using quinacridone rose and cerulean blue. Once in a while I think it's a good idea for me to talk about some substitutions. This is a really pretty purple mixture, but there are purples out there like dioxazine, there's permanent magenta, and there's permanent red violet. There's so many options for combinations of pretty pinks and pretty blues. And I really encourage you to play with your colors and try to find as many combinations of violet, for instance, as you can. You could do an exercise for yourself like you could play games saying, okay, I'm going to pick out all the violets that I can paint with my paints, and on Monday, and then maybe Tuesday you come up with color combinations for greens, for instance, and just play with your colors. What you'll find is you'll come up with favorites, and you'll keep coming back to those. I really prefer to mix pink and blue and make my own violets because, as you can see, I've got a bluish violet here, and then I've added more pink to the mixture, so it's not 50-50, it's maybe 70 pink, 20 cerulean blue. And then I can vary the color a little bit, and watercolor is just gorgeous to look at, you know, when you let the water do a lot of the mixing, and you can have within one shape of wet paint, you can have different colors like blending around and mixing with each other and just creating really pretty color passages. And that's just one of the beautiful things about watercolor that I really enjoy. So if I were just painting with plain violet, it would all be the same unless I added blue or pink to the violet, which is another option. There's so many options, aren't there? So I'm just adding a bit of extra blue to the bottom here. I like to have fun with color and not have my paintings be too rigid or stiff in the nature of the drawing or in the nature of the paint. I like to just really play. And I like to drop colors in like I'm doing now. I'm adding a little extra pink and a little extra blue to the bottom here while the paint is still wet. I like to let the watercolor do some of the mixing, and that can only happen if you drop the colors in while the paint is still wet. So there's our purple flowers. I'm going to go in and put some greens in while that's wet. So I'm going to put the greens in underneath the flowers. So I'm going to start with ultramarine blue and yellow ochre. Very nice green. And I'm going to paint that down at the bottom here. So because this is a very sunny day painting, I want to make sure I have some strong darks and some strong lights. So you see how I'm putting these brush strokes down? I'm putting the point down and swinging it to the left, and then I'm putting it down and swinging it to the right. And I want to create I want to just let my brush kind of dance across the paper and just make these fun little marks. Now I'm adding some blue, straight ultramarine blue, into the green at the bottom. Just because I think that would look nice down there. And now I'm going to grab some permanent green with my brush, and I'm going to put some of that in here underneath the purple flowers so that it bleeds up a bit into the purple and it bleeds down into the dark green. And I'm going to continue that over to the right, this pretty permanent green. So some artists will tell you never use colors straight out of the tube when you're painting, but I do sometimes, especially for a color like permanent green. It's really bright and pungent, and sometimes that's just what I want. I don't want to gray it down or mix it with anything else. But I can, if I want to make it even brighter, I can mix some of this cadmium yellow in with it, like that. And that's pretty too. Okay, so I'm going to continue this green while I've got it over here to the left. I'm using still the permanent green. And just making some pretty brush strokes. I'm going to add some cerulean blue to it. So when you're painting greens, you want to have yellowish greens and bluish greens, and you want to have a really nice variety. And so as I'm painting, I make a conscious effort to add some yellow or add some blue to my greens. So here's yellow ochre. And I'm adding some of that to this green mixture also. Now these little plants here, these are the ones that had those red berries, and well, in the photo it looks like red berries or red flowers, I'm not sure which. But I'm going to go ahead and add those now. So for those I'm going to use ultramarine blue and Viridian, because they look very bluish to me. Viridian is a beautiful teal blue. I really like that color. It is very transparent though. You need a lot of it when you use it, as opposed to these cadmium colors where you just need a tiny amount. So there's our Viridian. And those have some little pink flowers, but I don't want to add those yet because I want to wait until the blue-green dries. And the next thing I'd like to paint is the barrel. So cerulean blue, just by itself. I'll paint the barrel. I'm still using my number 8 brush. Now I'm going to wipe that off and pick up some of this ultramarine blue that I have here. Oh, I need some more. I'm going to add that to the top here so that it has a nice shadowy look. And I'm also going to draw, or excuse me, not draw, I'm going to paint this wooden, this bunch of wood that's stacked up here. And I'm going to use some sepia and burnt sienna. I just put down burnt sienna first and now I'm using sepia. And I'm going to draw, or paint, sorry, this wooden fancy thing, which we don't know what it is. At first I thought it was a beekeeping, but it's flat. It's not a box. Okay, so that will do it for those things. Now we're going to move on to painting the house. So we'll start with the beautiful roof. I'm going to use my cadmium red and yellow ochre. And I'm going to paint it, and I'm consciously going to leave some little white flecks of paper showing through. Like that. And I'm going to use some cadmium orange on this side. Same process. I'm going to just put the roof color into it. I'm painting around where the tree is coming up to. And I'm just leaving some little white spots. I want my roof to have some sparkle. And while these colors are wet, I'm going to drop other colors into them to let the water mix them around. So I'm going to start with Madder Lake, nice pink, and I'll put that into the roof on this side, right there. And now I'll pick up some ultramarine blue, and I'm going to put that into this shadowy part where there's a gutter or whatever is at the end of the roof there. I didn't actually mean, I don't want to put this here because my tree is going to go there. So if you make a mistake like that, you can see how easy this is to just pop some water on it and wipe it off. Okay, so back to the shadowy color, ultramarine blue and Madder Lake under here as well. Now I'm going to drop some yellows into the roof on this side. And I'm still being careful to not paint into my my white spots. I'm going to leave those. And some burnt sienna. A little more burnt sienna on this side. There, we've got our roof. Before I do these trees, I want to paint the side of the building. So I'm going to use yellow ochre to start, just a nice wash of yellow ochre. And I'm just painting right over my ink marks. And now I'm going to drop some orange, cadmium orange, right into my yellow ochre. I'm dropping it in on the left side. And I'm going to put some more of this ultramarine Madder Lake mixture I'm going to take some of the water off my brush by touching just the bristles where they meet the metal ferrule. I just touch those gently to the back or to a paper towel. You don't ever want to wipe off the front of your brush or the tip because you're going to wipe off all the pigment if you do that. You want to keep the pigment and lose the water. And you have to touch the bristles on the back. I'm going to add some purple flowers to the front of my villa and some pink ones. And I'm letting them bleed into the villa because I don't want them to be as bright and colorful as these because these are more forward and these are back a bit further. So that's on purpose. Now the next thing we want to paint is the beautiful blue sky. So I'm going to change my water and we'll be right back. So I'm going to use my number 8 brush for the blue sky. I'm going to use ultramarine blue just by itself. And I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to paint down towards the clouds. When I come to the top of where I've drawn the clouds, I'm just using, I'm making some rounded marks. I want to leave the clouds showing white. Just adding a little water as I come down towards the clouds so the sky is a bit brighter and darker at the top. And then as I come down towards the clouds, it gets slightly lighter and bluer. I'm going to add just a little more pigment to the clouds up here. So it's not too even. So I'm just dropping in a little extra pigment there. Now under the clouds, it's going to be lighter, so I'm going to add some cerulean to my ultramarine. And I'm going to paint this section with more water. And I want to leave the white clouds as much as possible, so I'm going along the top of the mountain and I'm swinging up with my brush into the clouds. Keeping this very light. So darker sky at the top, lighter sky under the clouds closer to the horizon. There we are. Now I'm going to add some violet to the clouds also. So I'm using Madder Lake and ultramarine blue and some cerulean. And I just took a lot of water off my brush and I very subtly want to add a little bit of shaping to my clouds. So I'm making sort of curved lines. Like so. I don't want to overdo it. So I'm blending them into the other watercolor. I said other watercolor, I mean other colors. The blue, just sort of, it's a nice way to sort of soften that edge and give the clouds some color. So I'm not painting the clouds in solid purple, I'm just giving them a little softening, little color, a little shape, because clouds need dimension too. Now I'm going to mix ultramarine blue and quinacridone rose, and I'm going to make a beautiful mountain color. I'm also going to add some cerulean blue. I'll have a nice bluey pink purple mountain back here. And I'm going to follow along, kind of follow along with my pen line. And I want to do this now while my sky is still a little bit wet, so I end up with a soft edge. So edges get softer as they go back in space, and that helps us perceive depth. And so I want to make sure that my mountain, the top of my mountain has a soft edge, and so I need to create that by having it be a wet edge. Now I'm just blending down with just water. Down to the top of the next ridge. And I'm going to leave a little bit of a white halo separating my roof line from the mountain. So there's our mountain. I'll take a picture before we go any further. Fun to start working on some of the fields back here and the little tiny villa. It's not tiny, but it looks small in our picture because it's so far away. So I'm using quinacridone rose, and I'm going to paint the roof with this rosy color. I guess I'll add a little orange to it also. It's very tiny, so it's a tiny little roof. And let's see. So the fields some of the fields have what look to be like pinkish red lines through them. So I'm going to start with that, and I'll show you how to paint this patchwork of fields. So I'm using yellow ochre and cadmium red. And I'm going to start with this field right here. And I'm going to paint my pen lines with this earthy red color. Like that. And next I'm going to pick up some yellow, and I'm going to paint, see, I want to get some yellow and some green. So I'm using permanent green and cadmium yellow. And I'm going to paint these fields here, some stripes, and I'm leaving white spaces in between. Some of my fields are going to have rows that are closer together, and some are going to have rows that are further apart. So always looking for how I can make every little element of the painting have something about it that's slightly different from the next. Okay, now I'm going to pick up some Viridian, and whoops, I need a little more. And I'm going to paint that in this field over here where those trees are, where there's like, it looks like an orchard. Same process where I'm leaving some white in between each of the lines. And at the bottom I'm going to put some yellow like this, just to kind of give the effect of a tree or bush or something, separating it from, so this is in the middle ground and this is in the foreground, just separating it from the foreground. In fact, I'm going to go all the way across with this pretty yellowy green border here. Even more yellow. There we go. I'm going to rinse my brush. Okay, now I'm going to mix cerulean blue with permanent green, and I'm going to do this field back here. So I painted those red lines. Now I want to go over the red lines with some green. I'm going to add some yellow ochre to it. And some cadmium orange. It's too bright, I think, for back here. Okay. just like that. So now we've got a different set of lines and colors. We've got the red and the green. So the fields behind this house, I'm just going to use the same color. Paint those in. Now I'm going to mix up a little blue with this green here. And the field way in the back, I'll make that kind of it almost looks like an olive green. And then the one behind that, I think I'll add some ultramarine to that blue. Back here. So just making a nice patchwork of fields. They don't have to be too different in color all the way at the back, because we're going to go over that with some more darks once we start putting in the trees, the Italian cypress trees. Okay, so while that is drying, I want to start putting in some of these dark cypress trees. So we're going to use ultramarine blue and cadmium lemon and a tiny bit of cadmium red. And I scribbled these in, so I'm just going to sort of go over my pen marks with these nice dark green trees. And I'm going to paint the ones behind the house. Just wherever I see the marks that I made with my pen, where I scribbled in these trees, I'm just painting over them with this nice dark green mixture. I'm going to get a little more blue into this mixture and a little more red. A lot of tiny little dark clumps of trees as you get closer to the mountains. So all these fields have beautiful rows of trees or roads or bushes or flowers separating them for each field. And it makes such a beautiful scene. So I'm going to put in a couple more back here, like that. Just having fun, just going along, making little tiny marks with our brush to say, hey, there's more trees back here. There's more farmland, more places to go and see and eat, because we're in Tuscany. I'm going to rinse my brush now, and I'm going to paint the sunny part of those trees. Remember the big section of trees where they have a lot of sun on them, and they had the really dark shadows in the bright sunny part. So now we're going to paint the sunny part. We painted the dark part already. So there's that. Nice row of dark, gorgeous trees. I'm going to paint that right up to the other cypress trees. And I've got this nice green on my brush. I'm going to rinse it off. I'm going to pick up a little more bright permanent green and viridian. And I'm going to put in these, well, it's not really dark enough. I'm going to put in those little circles of the orchard down here. I think I'll make more orchard. And I'm going to paint some darker lines here in this vineyard. And I'm going to paint the shadows now of these dark trees, casting a shadow onto the field next to it. So I'm mixing ultramarine blue and Madder Lake, and I mix it with a little bit of the green that was already on my palette. I just want to have a nice dark bluey violet. And I rinse my brush, and now I'm just using a little water to kind of soften the edge of the shadow. So the edges of shadows edges get softer as they move away from the object casting the shadow. Now I'm going to take some of this same blue color, and I'm going to go along the bottom of where I made a lot of the dark cypress trees. I want to just kind of give a nice little blue glow to the bottom of where they are, because I just assume they all have some kind of a little shadow under them, and it just looks pretty in my painting. There we go. I'm going to take a picture now before I go any further. So the next thing I want to do, I'm going to paint the front of this little tiny villa. It's in shadow, and it just looks like a very light purpley violet. So I'm just painting the front of that so that looks right. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is, while I've got clean water, is I just clean my water, is paint this pretty yellowy green olive tree. So I'm going to start with cadmium yellow lemon and cadmium orange. And I need a little more cadmium yellow lemon. I don't want it to be that orange. And we're just going to make our brush just kind of dance around here on the left and make these beautiful yellow brush strokes. Like this. Now, inside of these yellow brush strokes, and while the paint is still wet, I'm going to paint the dark part. So this tree is lit from behind. It's backlit. So I'm going to use burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. That's a great color combination to memorize, by the way, for a dark green. And I'm going to paint that right in the middle here. And it looks very dark, but I'm leaving lots of white showing in between because I want to have air holes. And remember, I said I want my painting to have a good amount of contrast. So there is the dark green part. And you can see how it's blending into the yellows up above. I'm going to add some more cadmium lemon just to make a couple brighter spots there. Like that. There, very nice. And the olive trees over here by the villa, we'll make those with Viridian and the yellow that I already have mixed up on my paper, on my palette. And we're painting those right in here like this. So I wanted the tree purposefully to come into the roof and the side of the building, which it does, just to break up that cube. Now I'm going to add some more Viridian, and as we move over to, I'll move my paper over, as we move over to the right side here, I want it to be a little more bluish. Even though they're two trees that are both olive trees, it's just kind of nice to have the green go from yellowy green to bluish green. And these trees have a dark bottom also, but I'll make it different. So I've mixed cerulean blue in with the dark mixture that I had mixed up for that tree. And I'm just painting that in here like that. And I'll put a couple of extra brush strokes just so that it has enough color and body to stand out in front of the house. So there's our olive tree. And I'm going to go in and paint now the side of this building where that second roof is. I'll use my number 6 brush now. So I'll use yellow ochre. I'm going to paint the whole thing with yellow ochre. And then into that yellow ochre I'm going to drop some of this violet just at the top to make it look like there's a bit of a shadow being cast there. And I'm going to put some of that color there as well. And I want to emphasize this dark seam between the two sections of the roof. So I've added a nice blue violet for that. And where the roof comes up to this second section of the building that pops up, I'm putting some nice violet there to just help that transition. And I'm smoothing this line out a bit, brushing it to the right and to the left over the roof. There we go. Now I want to paint the trunk of this olive tree right here. So I'm going to start with sepia and burnt sienna. I want a nice rich dark brown. Sepia is a bit too green and burnt sienna is a bit too red. So when you mix the two together, you get a nice rich color. And I'm using my number 6 brush, which has a really good point. Number 4 would also be good. And I'm painting over my ink where I've drawn the branches in the trunk. And I'm going to do the same thing for these trees. I'll move this over so you can see a bit better. So you want to make sure when you do branches that you make a line and then lift up your brush, and make another line and lift up your brush, make another line, and so on, because the branches are visible where the leaves are not. And so you'll have places where branches are showing through and places where they're hidden by the leaves, and to give that effect you need to lift up your brush and not make your branches too long and stringy. I think I'm going to make a couple more branches over here just for fun. There. Now remember this dark bush that's in front of these purple flowers? I'm going to go ahead and make that dark color now. So I'm going to use burnt sienna and viridian. And it's not going to be as dark as the photo. Remember that photos make contrast greater, which means the darks are darker and the lights are lighter. And if you ever want to see what this looks like for yourself and observe how much contrast your phone or iPad creates, take it outside and take a picture that you can look at right there on the spot and compare what's in your screen to what you see in person. And especially take time to look into the shadows and see how dark they are compared to your photo, and then ask yourself on a value scale of 1 to 10, how many value shades darker is it? And once you do that a few times, you'll get a really good understanding of how to work with your photos and how to understand what you're looking at in terms of value. So I'm just mixing up a couple more dark shades. I mixed a little bit of ultramarine and cerulean in with this green so that even the dark green has some variety. And I'm bringing some of that dark green down into the flowers, and some places I'm leaving some white up above them. Now remember, we talked about this photo, how there's a lot of sort of reddish dirt on the ground here. So I've mixed cadmium red and yellow ochre, and I want to just paint that in. I want to leave bits of white just to give my painting some sparkle. And there are also some places where it's pretty and green. So I've got a bit of reddish, earthy colored ground, and now I'll have a bit of green. So that's a nice contrast. Complementary colors next to each other. And I think it's nice to have the green around the reddish wood. That's contrast as well. And now around the barrel, there's that grapevine with its yellow leaves. So I want to paint some yellowy, I've got too much orange in my colored mixture there. Some yellowy, bright yellowy green leaves here. And then we'll paint the grapevine stem. And there's some nice bright yellow down on the ground here. So I'm just arranging, like the field behind this house, I'm arranging a patchwork of pretty colors. Now I'm going to mix some red with my permanent rose, or my quinacridone rose, and I'm going to put some brush strokes of this nice light red here on the ground. That kind of grounds all the greens to have some red in the foreground, like that. And on the left side, I think I'll add some orange to the ground around here. So even dirt can be bright and beautiful, can't it? Now we've got a nice assortment of colors. I'll put some orange over here and some browns. Now I didn't paint the side of this building. I think I'll do that now. So I'll use yellow ochre and some Madder Lake and ultramarine blue. I wanted to leave room to put the trees in first before I painted the side of the building. So our painting has a lot of nice sparkle now, but our greens in the landscape behind are a bit too homogeneous. So I want to brighten those with some pretty colors now. I'm going to use some cerulean blue. Cerulean blue and permanent green. And I'm going to make this field here a bit brighter. Still leaving a few specks of white, some white stripes. And I want to paint the road. So the road is like a clay color, so I'll use cadmium red and orange. And lots of water. I don't want it to be too dark. So there's our road. And I'm going to use this pretty yellowy green also on this field. So I'm going to mix cadmium yellow and permanent green, and we'll brighten this one as well. It's like dropping in liquid sunshine. Now I'll add some cadmium orange to that, and we'll paint this field in the far distance. We'll give that some more yellow. And let's see, we'll put some Madder Lake and ultramarine blue. So some nice dark trees on the side of the house here, just to make it pop forward a bit, kind of frame it. Sometimes I decide I just need a dark or a bright or something like that, and I just put it in there. Say, ah, that must be a couple of trees back there. I'm adding a little bit of a darker base with ultramarine blue and madder lake to the bottom of my villa. And these trees, they aren't quite dark enough, so I'm going to use ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow lemon, and I'm going to make them a bit darker on their shadow side. Like that. Now I'm also going to add some cadmium orange and cadmium yellow and cerulean blue to this field back here. I'm going to make a few more stripes. So I don't want it to be too bright because it's so far in the distance, but it needs a little more hue. And to this field, I'm going to add some permanent green. Just some nice stripes of that color there. And some green in front of my villa. We're almost finished. I'm going to take a picture before we do the final details. I would like to add some green shutters to the windows. So I'm using my number 4, and I'm going to use straight Viridian. And I'm going to paint these windows. Sorry, not windows, shutters. So you can make some of them have with vertical brush strokes like this, and you can make some with small little horizontal marks like a shutter. And I think I'll give it a red door. I like red doors. There's my red door. And I'll give my red door a shadow. I'm using ultramarine blue and madder lake, and I'm just making a little shadow to show that it's recessed. So that's a nice detail to add. And now I'm going to add some tree shadows on the ground. So I'm going to mix, I'll wipe off my palette, I'm going to mix a nice violet color with madder lake and ultramarine blue. So ultramarine blue, madder lake, a little more blue, a little more madder lake. There we go, that's a nice color. And we'll make some nice shadows on the ground for these trees. And shadows under here from these olive trees. So you don't have to think about drawing a specific shadow shape. You can just, they have trunks and branches and leaves, and they cast kind of wiggly filtered shadows. And I want to have creative brush strokes and creative lines. And I want to connect my trees with a nice shadow in between. But I don't want to snuff out all my bright, pretty colors. So it's a fine line between overdoing it and getting a good amount of shadow. You don't want to overdo it. So make sure you take a minute to sort of lean back or step back from your painting when you're in the finishing stages and trying to decide if you've got enough I'm going to add some more dark violets here in my purple flowers. I don't really see dark violets in the photo, but I don't want to add any more dark green because I've got enough of that throughout my painting. And I'm re-emphasizing the darks on my wood here, my wood square. And the base of this tree, giving it a real dark with ultramarine blue and madder lake. And I'll even use the tiny point of my brush to make a couple little windows on my villa. Overdid it. There we go. And I'm going to use some same color but with water, and I just want to make this a bit darker there. And I also want to add a little more red to my field stripes. Very subtle. And I'm going to make my road a little bit brighter. It faded too much. I'm putting a little orange on it, cadmium orange. And I'll put a couple of dots of yellowy green right in front of the house here. It had lots of trees. And a few more spots of yellow. Now another thing I want to do, this plant in the front had some red flowers, so I'm going to use my red and lots of water because I don't want them to be too bright. And I'll put some red flowers in here, like that. Now I'm going to use this violet madder lake mixture, and I want to just re-emphasize my lines that I made to show the stems of this plant because they're so pretty. And the last color thing I want to do is I want to add a little more of my quinacridone rose. Just want to put a little more punchy pink right in here in my flowers. I'm going to take a picture and then we're going to go back over this with a few marks with my Posca white acrylic pen. I just remembered one more thing that I wanted to show you. So as you look at the picture in the distance, you can see hints of other villas. And I say hints because they're so tiny. And they're these little tiny red roofs way off in the distance. And I want to just put a few marks where I've left white marks in my painting where you can see a bit of the white of the paper showing through. I just want to put some small lines of red roofs to give the look of there being villas in the distance. It's a small detail that will have a very big impact, and you probably can't see it because it's so tiny, but I'm going to take another picture now and show this to you because it really adds something to the painting. It really does add something special. Okay, and maybe one more here. Okay. So with the Posca pen, you have to shake it a little bit and take off the back cap and push the button a couple of times. I always test it on my hand to make sure that it's working right. So I'm going to make a few white marks in my flowers, just small little squiggly marks. So I'm doing that first. Now if you use this pen and your watercolor is still a little bit wet, that is fine. You'll just get a soft edge. I actually like it, and that's one of the reasons I like the brush tip. These come in different pen widths, but I guess because I'm a painter, I just enjoy the brush tip. So I'm going to re-emphasize the highlight on my barrel there, and the one on my square wooden thing. Give a couple highlights there. And what else? Oh, maybe on the roof here, I'll make a couple of marks. I left some white paper showing, but I thought it would be fun to also add a few more white highlights on the roof. And I think I'll put a couple in this tree. So if your pen starts to run dry, just push the button a couple more times. Be careful not to push the button above your painting, because I've had it drip a big blob of white paint right onto my painting before. That wasn't good. So I'll put a few more marks here on this tree. And I'll put a couple back here. Just here and there. Little white sparkly lines and dots. Just creating a little air and separation. Can even have some within our shadow shape here and at the edge of the field. There, I think that will do it. You could put one or two on the side of the house if you like. Not necessary though. That was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed this video and our little trip to Tuscan farmland. I miss this place. I can't wait to get back there someday. Thanks for joining me. Bye. It's me again. I forgot. I wanted to add some white to the clouds just to soften some of the edges, and I didn't do that. So I'm doing that right now with my trusty pen. I didn't want you to miss anything. There we are. Okay. Thanks again.